Now, this is a sort of a more intense one, about the whole thing of, performing in the world and the legal system and just having faith. So the question is, courts are institutions that we should only resort to as a last resort. I always thought so. However, when this is not possible because we are faced with a situation that humanly seems unfair to us, when, for example, it is a matter of separating a 6-year-old daughter from a father with whom she has a good relationship and is present father. So he abides by all aspects of his role as a father, although separated from the mother. But the mother has decided to change countries. Is it right to look for justice in the court, or will it be right to accept as a karmic consequence of an entire past situation? Could you comment on these types of situations that happen so normally these days? So one thing Guruji is very clear on is he is clear about, you are living in this world. When people talk to him about not feeling well, he'll say, go to a doctor. If you're having trouble in a business, see an accountant, get legal representation. Like, he's very much about us being in the world, but not attached to the world. So there are a number of reasons why this situation could be happening. It could be karma, that in a past life, this father had removed a child from somebody and caused a lot of emotional turmoil. But it's worth sort of, keeping your focus on Guruji and finding out what the legal repercussions are, finding out what are the father's rights. Maybe it's a question of, yes, the mother can do this, but only if the father agrees. And that happened to my brother, actually. His ex-wife, sort of went on a temper tantrum and moved with the kids. And he wasn't able to stop the move, but he was able to get custody for large chunks of time where the kids came back and stayed with him. And what he learned was how to show love at a distance, right? He showed these kids that no matter where they were in the world, that he loved them. Guruji shows us that we don't have to be in his physical presence to know he loves us. So it's important in a situation like this to not make the kids feel like they're in a tug of war, and also not to sort of smear the other parent, because these kids know they're half and half. They're half the mother, half the father. So it's so dangerous to their sense of who they are if they think that half themselves is awful because the parents are slinging mud at each other. So it's so important for kids to see a united, loving solution, that the parents are not trying to harm each other by blackmailing or doing a tug of war, that, as Guruji says, love should be the first thing that's always at the top of the mind. So, for the husband or the father who's upset about having his child leave, get your legal information so you do understand your rights, but also understand that child does not belong to either of you. This child is God's. So you are trying to find the best solution for that child. This shouldn't be about the parents. This is about the best thing for the child. And if the child sees you working together to come up with a loving solution, that's the greatest gift you can give them. And what happened with my brother was, when he didn't fight and he let his ex go with the boys to another place, he just kept being gentle and kind and easy to get along with. And within a year, they moved back. So I think that was the lesson. I think if he hadn't been loving and compromising and trying to work to a solution, I think those kids would have stayed away a lot longer. So these solutions they resolve themselves when the divine sees that you learned the lesson. Because everything that happens to us is a lesson. There isn't one thing that happens as an accident or a oops. God doesn't sort of go, oops, I shouldn't have done that. Like everything is for a reason, and it's for our growth, and it's for us to learn compassion and to not throw gas on a fire, right? It's about learning how to be gentle and caring with each other. When you see that, they grow up to be gentle, caring people as well. But I think the biggest thread that comes from all these questions is giving too much power to our mind, right? Like all of these pretty much boil down to your mind is going around and round in circles trying to figure out a solution to something. And honestly, if you make yourself chant Om Namo Narayana every time your mind starts babbling to you, it will calm you down, and then a solution just drops in completely unannounced. And usually the solutions drop in faster if you're doing something you love, right? So if you're worried, crank up the music and dance, or go for a long walk, paint, like anything that makes you happy. And I find that as soon as I do that, answers drop in when you're not thinking about it. You're not thinking about the question or the problem. You're just being a spiritual being having a human experience, right? So do the things you love and answers show up.
Jai Gurudev, Swamini.
Jai Gurudev.
I was wondering, how did you cope with the different philosophy? Because you said you've started actually your spiritual journey with Advaita Vedanta. And
yes.
I also kind of learned and was introduced into spirituality through this philosophy. Where I met Guruji, but it was very difficult to me to make the transition and to kind of cope with philosophy. And I was drawn to Guruji, but in a way didn't want to let go of this path and these practices I've learned. And it was hard for me. So how did you cope with that? Or was it also hard for you to like switch or integrate it?
Well, I think it wasn't hard for me just because I was starting to question the other philosophy already. And what I was experiencing in India was, it was very tantra. So it was techniques. It was this technique would create this result. And love was never mentioned anywhere at any time. And I had always felt like there was this something in me that was guiding me, right? I always felt a consciousness that was helping. It was this little voice that would just sort of chirp up. And my son, of course, told me I shouldn't tell people I'm hearing voices. But what does he know? But there was always this guidance the guidance did take me to India, to the Shaivite tradition. And I learned amazing things, and I'm very grateful because I did learn the Vedas and Upanishads and things that are mutual to the two lineages. But this constant idea that there was no separation, that it was all just one and we were supposed to disappear back into this one. I remembered being confused because I thought, well, who is it that's been talking to me? Because it was very clear to me that it wasn't me. The advice was so profound and from somewhere else, and I felt waves of love whenever I got that advice. And I was so confused that there was no place for that in that tradition, right? That there was no such thing as a separate thing that you were supposed to love, and that you weren't trying to have a relationship with God. You wanted to just disappear into this consciousness. And so I was already having a conflict with that. So when I met Guruji, and I just felt, massive love, and I thought, this is the voice I've been hearing. Like, it was so clear to me that here was a separate person, and also that the reality wasn't an illusion. That was the other thing I wasn't grasping with the other tradition, is they're like, all of this is just an illusion. It's not real. And I thought, well, I'm getting hit in the head pretty hard. It seems pretty real to me. And so the Vishishta Advaita Vedanta, that yes, it is real because it's God. Like everything we see is God. And he's created this playground for us so that we will enjoy it and fall in love with him. And that just resonated so much with me, because I thought that's what's been missing. Like, I'm so aware of what's real and what's not real. And it was very hard for me to understand this was an illusion. And as soon as I was given permission to love God again, it just resolved everything for me. Because, you know, when I'll be alone, you know, here I am isolated in Canada, and just waves of love just pouring over me. And I don't have to push it aside and say it's not happening, it's not real, right? Like all of, so I realized I did understand Ramanujacharya's approach better than Adi Shankaracharya's approach. That I finally understood the debate between those two groups, was that you were created to love God. Like, that's your only reason for being. And me spending years in India, starving and alone, trying to disappear into the grand void, it wasn't going so well for me. I hope that helps.
It's true. 5 years ago now, when I first show up in Just Love Festival, there was a feeling that I was like, I had all the background, my loving parents, but something was missing, like someone bigger.
Mm-hmm.
Religion was not in place in our family.
Right.
I left the Just Love Festival with the feeling that I have two parents, or I have divine parents, and I have someone I can count on, which I couldn't like explain, as you said, that I have a buddy, I'm not alone.
Yeah.
And there was just...
Exactly.
Can I ask you something?
Of course.
Do you ever have moments where you have no idea what to do? I mean, because you're Swamini, so you kind of know how things work a little more than us.
It's interesting because he definitely downloads software into you when you're initiated, because I'm not confused anymore. And I used to be, right? I used to be in my head, and there was always too many options for what I should do, and it's all disappeared. And so I remember when
like never freeze or something. You never like freeze or something, or all your phobias are gone.
Yeah, it just, and some of it is definitely the initiation with Guruji. But what I also realized was, you know, he waited, I'm 66 years old, right? So he waited a long time and let me just get hammered into mush out in the world. And so I know a lot of things were removed from me, having life as my teacher. You know, he says you have different gurus in your life. First it's your parents, then it's life. You know, the whole Hindu tradition of going through, you know, brahmachari, householder, you know, grihista, sannyas. It makes a lot of sense to me, because that was the path I followed. And I used to be so confused all the time and just chaos. But different big events that really shook me also shook a lot of awareness into me. So I always felt like Guruji's hand was there all the time. So even though I felt abandoned and alone in some of these traumas, it was so clear that something old had been removed from me, right? Like I used to be so anxious about stupid things. You know, when I was here in Canada and I had a successful career, right? I was opening radio stations, doing marketing, promotions, concerts, married to a wealthy man, right? And I had horrible anxiety and stress. And then fast forward to 10 years later, when I was homeless with a baby in California. And all those things I'd been worried about in that marriage seemed so ridiculous. Like, I was worried about stupid things. And when I was finally homeless with a baby, it's like the whole world just slowed down. And that's when the real sincere talks with God happened. And when I surrendered, that's when the guidance became really clear, because it had become obvious didn't have a clue how to live, right? You know, in Canada, in that first marriage, I'd chased all the dreams that I was supposed to, and I'm miserable. And when I had nothing, I finally found God. And I think that's what Guruji's watching for in all of us, you know, right? So if you're doing your sadhana and it feels like you're not getting anywhere, you're erasing things from your shiny soul, and he can see that. So it was interesting, the day he initiated me, you know, he put his hand on my head and he started chanting, and I could feel all this energy like downloading into my body. And he just chanted and chanted and chanted. And finally I started shaking, like I started vibrating. And I think he knew, okay, she's full up. can't stuff one more thing in there, because it was like, oh, okay, this is it. And I started to feel weird through the rest of the Navaratri, but I kept functioning. And then as soon as Navaratri was over, I collapsed. And I remember laying in bed and everything hurt. Like it was like I was having the worst rheumatoid arthritis attack on the planet, right? Everything ached. And I had a high fever. But it would all stop at mealtime, and I'd get dressed and I'd stagger down to the dining room, and they'd laugh at me because they're like, how you doing? I was like, I don't know. And they'd feed me, and I'd go back up to bed, and the pain and the fever would return. And I know he was purifying everything, right? He was cleaning out the cobwebs and removing the last things that would have held me back from what he had downloaded. And ever since then, it's like, I felt like I crossed the finish line, that there's nothing to worry about anymore, and there's nothing to be afraid of anymore. You know, when I roam around Canada here as a nomad, which my friends, you know, who've been with me since childhood are in shock, because they've got pension plans, and they've got savings accounts, they've got, you know, their mortgage and their house, and they've got all their stuff, and I'm bouncing around with a suitcase, and they can't figure it out. So, and I know, because of his care, I know I will never fall back to the level I've been through, right? I know that no matter what happens, that even if I appear to be homeless, that it doesn't mean I don't have a home, right? So he's taken away all of the fear. And, you know, it was a long way coming to this. And I feel for you younger ones, because, you know, congratulations for getting on the path so young, right? Because you will still have to go through things. You know, don't underestimate what's going to happen. You will still have to go through experiences as a result of your karma, or to shake you up out of your comfort zone. But since you're protected, it will never be as bad as it should be. Like, I've had several injuries on this path, and it was explained to me that I should have had a violent death, but because I'm under the care of the guru, it's just an injury. And, you know, there's a very famous story about Mahavatar Babaji, that he was sitting around the fire with some of his devotees one night, and he suddenly grabbed the hand of the man next to him and stuck it in the fire and burned him badly. And of course, everyone just jumped, thinking their guru had lost his mind. And he just looked at them and said, what, you would have rather he died a violent death by fire? So he had paid the karma off for this man. And so there had to be some payment. He had to experience a burned hand, but the karma was his whole body should have burned and he should have died. So when you're under the care of a guru, he helps you go through the karma in a smaller way. You pay a very small price for what should have been a big karmic debt. So for that, as he has said, simply chanting Om Namo Narayana and having that rolling in your consciousness all the time. Like you'll see, Buddhist monks, they have prayer wheels that spin. It's like a little wheel and it's got these, and they're spinning it all the time. And it's to remind them to have their japa spinning in their throat all the time. So that's why they use these prayer wheels as a reminder. And this was what Ramanujacharya taught, was just having Om Namo Narayana chanting in your inner space all the time. Like that practice alone, you're the best actor Guruji could have, right? If that chant is rolling around in your head all the time, then you will always behave correctly. You'll always make the right choice, and you'll always be available to his inspiration, right? So you will be, like they say, empty bamboo. You will always be ready to be filled up by him wherever you are. So say you're walking down the street and all of a sudden he needs one of his followers to get a block over to help somebody who's in distress. He knows that you're available, that he can drop that idea into your head and you will turn and you'll run and you'll help someone. Or, there's a situation going on and you realize that starting an Om chanting circle will be perfect for this situation, right? So that's what, when you say to be the perfect actor, it means to always be available. And the fact that all he does is reiterate chanting, and it's not just Om Namo Narayana, he's also got us now doing Shri Vitala Giridhari Parabrahmane Namaha. And I'm finding that that's actually creating more energy in me these days. So he has shifted it for a reason. There's who knows how long he's talking to us about doing that new chant. So I use both of them. I find that when I'm puttering around and doing housework and cooking and things, the Om Namo Narayana naturally starts playing. And for a long time, what I did is on YouTube, there's several of those of Guruji chanting Om Namo Narayana. Like there's one that goes for an hour. And I find that if I have that playing in my head, when I wake up, it's already playing in my head. So that's the shift he's talking about us making, is if you can have that japa going on constantly, then you have achieved perfection, right? You're available for divine inspiration all the time, anywhere, any day. He's just saying, you have a lot of hours in a day to fill up, so don't fill it up with crap, right? So instead of, just idly scrolling through social media or, throwing on something on TV that puts you into a mindless state, he's like, those are the times when you should be reading about, the saints, or reading the scriptures, reading his Just Love books, or doing self-inquiry. Like if whenever I've been confronted with a situation that has made me react in a way that I'm not proud of, right? Like if somebody says something to me and I just turn into a jerk, that's when I would do the self-inquiry. And, I would ask myself, so why are you behaving like that? Why would that statement upset you so much? And that's the self-inquiry, when you don't let your actions just go unmonitored. And when you're asking yourself that, you can still have the chant rolling in your head. And by having the chant going on, the self-inquiry will work faster. Right? Because if you do self-inquiry, say somebody has said something that upset you, and you immediately start having, this is how I used to behave when I used to love to fight, and the fight would carry on in my head for days after, right? So it wouldn't just be an argument at work. I would keep replaying it and thinking, oh, I should have said this, or oh, I should have said that. that's not self-inquiry, right? That's letting your mind run amok. So self-inquiry is about, why has this situation upset me so much? Or why won't I stop thinking about this fight? What's going on? And if you've got japa running in your head, one of the chants, then the real answer can drop in, because your mind can't come up with the answer. If you say, why is this bothering me so much? Well, because that person's a jerk, right? Like, that's your mind justifying why you behave badly. And what you want is, you want the real answer. And most of our responses in life were created by the time we were 3 years old, right? So just as a young child, you watch the world, you watch how people respond to things, and that becomes your template in your head. And that's what you want to dig out. So if, I tell you to have japa going all the time, if you rebel against that, like, no, I'm not going to do japa, or no one can tell me what to do. If you go back, like self-introspection, you go back, and I bet you can find an event when you were 2 or 3 years old, when someone told you to do something you didn't want to do, right? And you reacted to it. So most of your emotional responses were created when you were a child. And that's what you want to get rid of. You don't want those reactions to put a barrier between you and truth, you and the divine. And you'll see that, when Guruji will all of a sudden set a new bunch of rules at the ashram, and people start reacting to it, right? Resistance, arguing, why do we have to do that? That's when you want to do introspection, because it's triggered something in you from your past, right? He could tell you to paint the whole ashram blue, and the next day tell you to paint it green. And there should be no response, right? There should be no emotional reaction to that. You should be, okay, today we're painting it again, right? But if any instruction sets off a bomb in you, then that's when you need introspection. And sometimes you can't chant away that bomb, right? You can be doing your chanting, but the emotions are still erupting. And that's when you have to go in and ask yourself, why can't I get past this, right? What is happening? And if it's something that you can't dig out, then what I do is I physically just hand it over to the guru, right? Lay it at his feet and just go, beyond me why this is happening, it's all yours. And I found now that there's so little emotional response to things, that if just a situation occurs that I'm not sure what to do next, I just hand it to him. I just picture myself putting it at his feet and go, okay, buddy, let me know. Let me know what the answer is. And then I just keep chanting. And if you can make yourself believe that you've handed it over, that's the other thing is, you can't just hand it over and then keep mulling it over and worrying in your head. You have to sincerely give it up and say, I'm handing it to you. I don't know what to do next. And that's why he wants us reading like the Bhagavatam. That's what I find so useful, is reading about how other situations have resolved themselves is really helpful, because you start to see your life, especially the Bhagavad Gita. It took me years to understand the Bhagavad Gita. I read 4 commentaries before I met Guruji. And then his commentary, I had my eureka moment. I was like, well, that's what that meant. So every teacher has a different spin on the events, and you just have to find the one that really connects with you. And I found that the way Guruji explained it and the way he matched it up to our lives was so important for me, because I could see, just even Acharya on Arjuna on the battlefield, I could think of work situations where I'd been in that same situation, right? Where all of a sudden, you're being asked to step up and you don't want to. You don't want to. And the fact is, it's your dharma and you have to step up. I would actually flip it. I would say, once you've read the knowledge and the understanding, you can put it all away and just do your japa on how to interpret it. Because Guruji's basically saying it all comes down to love, right? That once you go past the knowledge, the intellect, you keep going through these different steps and you wind up with just love. So it's good to fill up those idle moments with reading, true wisdom instead of just doing something inane, because you can feel the energy levels, right? Like sometimes people want me to watch a movie with them and within 20 minutes I have to leave because I can just feel myself sinking, the topic or the mood that's being set. Like movies can be incredibly inspiring or very dangerous because they mess with your psyche. I can't wait to make some like spiritual movies about Guruji, because I think it would be so amazing to have his energy hit the big screen, right? Like to me, that would just be the best gift to give humanity. That's what he's warning you about, is be careful what you put in, because it can really affect you badly if it's not a healthy, uplifting. Very few of us are in a state where we can just move through those situations without being affected. Guruji can move through anything and it's not going to affect him. But the rest of us, that tar, we sort of move through these energy fields, malls, airports, and this tar kind of gets stuck to us, and it's this dark energy. And your practice is what keeps removing it from your system. Yeah, we're still good.
So, okay, I had a comment, Swamini.
Yes.
Just now when you mentioned handing over to Guruji, like an emotion. And my very short experience is as devotees, I was just initiated by him in March.
Oh, excellent.
Yes, and my life has like transformed phenomenally. And what I'm doing, you've advised us on using our intuition, like asking, what of this should I do, and waiting to hear. What I've been doing is asking him. So let me tell you two things that happened in a very phenomenal way. I'm sitting in darshan and I'm wondering, is he looking at me now? You know how you can tell when he's going from screen to screen? And when he came to me, that's when I asked the question, is it me now? And he nodded. My mic is muted. And, that's not something that he does. The second time when I asked, I was like, it was a desire related thing. I won't go into details, but I was like, okay, the only reason I'm doing this is because it gives me pleasure. Guruji, tell me whether I should do it again. When I was done, I had the word Kamadeva. I didn't know who Kamadeva was. Kamadeva is the god of desire. Yes, and basically Guruji was telling me, yes, you can continue to do this if you want to worship him. Of course, I don't want to worship a demigod. So that was very clear. The answer was like, don't do this if it's me who's your objective.
Nice.
So I think even as devotees, we have such powerful access to him directly to tell us things if we use it.
Yes. And that's a great reminder, because a lot of people think they're not high enough up the food chain to be able to ask, or they're not close enough, or they don't have a tilak, and that's not true. We're all loved equally, and all you have to do is keep working on that relationship, and just understanding that this conversation can be ongoing, that you don't have to be more worthy or whatever to have a conversation with God. Like my conversation started when I was what I thought was as far away from being a devotee as you could get, right? You're homeless with a kid. I just thought I was trash, and the conversation was going. So we're all loved you know, in such a profound way. And even Guruji said that in one of the satsangs recently. He said, you have no idea how much you're loved. You just have no idea. Right? So embrace that and ask the questions like you're doing. Ask for advice, and then be silent. Don't let your mind respond. Wait for a real answer to drop in. Well, there was another question here. Swamini, is it Guruji who decides who walks in your life and who leaves you? Well, I think it's, you know, the Saptarishis. I think we all, you know, are swimming in and out of each other's perimeters. And I think it is beyond our control who's coming in and who leaves. So would you like to share how you become a Swamini? Beats me. You just show up at the ashram with some maple syrup. So I think what, for me, what was really profound was when I sannyas vows. So this is something that is available in our lineage, but I don't think Guruji demands it of anybody. It's, you know, it's in the devotee manual. But as far as I know, I'm one of the few who actually took the sannyas vows 3 years before I met him. So what the sannyas vows are, there's only 5. It's a very simple existence. So it's non-stealing, truthfulness, non-violence, brahmachari, right, celibacy, and aparigraha, living with less. And what I found those vows did was it detached me from reality. It made me not care what happened, where I was sent, you know, what came or went. And sannyas is supposed to always give things away. If someone shows an interest in something that you don't need for your life, like if someone shows an interest in your computer, you don't hand it over. But I was doing puja in a temple one day, and this tiny little boy came up to me, and he loved the deity that I had. And he was 4 years old. And I, you know, so we chatted a bit, and then he wandered away, and I found his mother. And I said, is it okay if I give him this? And she was like, oh no, you know, that's too much. And I said, no, that's one of my vows, is he has shown a real interest in a deity. So I think he's supposed to have it, but I want to make sure it's okay with you. And she was like, well, of course. And so I gave it to him, and I thought, you know, who knows what this will start, right? Who knows who this little guy is supposed to become? But the fact that he was already attracted, it was a Kalabarava deity. And the fact that he was fascinated by it, to me, was a real sign. And I felt so excited giving it to him. It was more excited than I'd been when I received it. And so that, I realized, was the shift in consciousness that sannyas created in me. Was it mattered more to see somebody else happy than for me to be happy. And I think that change in perspective was important, you know, before becoming a Swamini, because we're here to be of service, you know, and that's, to me, anything I can do, any way I can be available is what he's looking for from us, because Guruji can't be everywhere physically all the time. And so he puts an energy in us that then gets transferred to whatever location he sends us. So I can see the effect that he's having in my hometown. You know, I hadn't lived in Calgary for decades, and all of a sudden I'm back here, and it's affecting everything, right? So it's like he just stuck me as a lamppost to start shifting the area. And I think every Swamini, Swami, Rishi that he sends out in the world, it's to be a new lamppost that starts broadcasting for him and shifting situations. So I think having pounded out all my career dreams just are gone. You know, the family attachments are gone. Everything has left. So I have no reason for being anymore other than for him. And I think that's the consciousness that he's watching for to make someone a Swami. For me now, there's no such thing as vacation. Like my life has become a vacation because it's grander than any of the empty resort things I did when I had money, right? Like when I was married to a rich man, I've never been lonelier in my whole life than that time. And now I have everything. So, and I don't have to plan it, right? Like the worry's been taken away from me. He says, go here, I go there, right? I don't have to plan anything anymore. It just keeps happening, right? So when you're in that state, it becomes effortless, that everything just drops in. Okay, let's close with a Om Shanti, okay? Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Shri Guru Pyo Namaha. Hari Om.